Hey, Johan here again. Good to see you. Hope it went well with the last three courses there with the notes and scales and everything. I left you with that course with the advice of going forward with chord progression, and I realized that a few things that you might need to be more clear on the chord progression and the language used in that area. Intervals are important. So I'll do this short video of intervals, and then I'm going to publish two more videos where we do the chord scales and then we compose a song together to see how that goes, how it works and how it all fits together. We're going to use the 4-chord song as a concept, so be a watch out for that one. But for now, intervals, it's not too complicated. It's pretty much straightforward. Good luck with that one. Have a good one. Cheers. Music intervals is just the distance between two notes. It is like any other distance, but we just measure the distance between notes, and those notes and that distance is expressed by this: the first, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, and so forth. Unison is a distance of no distance, and octave is the distance of the same note but just higher, and those are all intervals. If you look at the musical stuff there, that the distance is expressed is as a move across the lines. So if you go from the bottom, that would the E note would be on the bottom line, and if you want to measure the distance to the G, you would come up on the second line from the bottom, and that would be a distance of a third. The music interval comes in two measures, if you wish. The second, third, fourth, fifth is one measure that you can communicate, but you also have to define what type of third and what type of second measure that you have. And those types of distances are major, minor, perfect, diminished, and augmented. So if you look at the third there, the third is one distance, but you have to define what type of third you have. If you have a major third or a minor third, those are two different distances. You also have the perfect. The 1, 4, 5, 8, 11, 12, 15, all of them are perfect. The 4 and 5 are perfect to 1, and you can hear that when you play them because they sound good together, and they sound good together because the frequencies, if you mathematically would divide them, they would add up evenly. I think they would add up to 2/3 or something like that. But anyhow, you can hear them when you play them together. The sound waves will convene regularly, so they sound good together. And why the 4 and the 5 both are perfect? Well, think of the circle of fifth. If you went clockwise, we counted every fifth, and if we count anti-clockwise, we had every fourth, and that can help you to make sense of why the 4 and the 5 are perfect. Now, in between the perfect 4 and the perfect fifth, you have the augmented 4 or diminished 5. And that is to define that distance, but it's also to define the distance in the circumstance you're in. So if you do a chord scale, which we're going to do in the next video, the diatonic chord scale, the major scale, the 7th note is a diminished chord, and that diminished chord is defined by the perfect fifth being flattened, you can say, but we don't use flat, we say diminished in this case. So it's a diminished 5, and that will then define a diminished chord. The reason why we don't say flat is because that even if we flatten a note a half step, it doesn't necessarily mean that we end up on a flat note. It can end up on a natural note, and that can be confusing. So you flat something to natural, or you flat something to flat. That can be very, very confusing. So that's why we use the diminished or augmented chord. Of course, also depends on if you do an augmented chord. We're going to do that in this video. You're going to see the augmented chord. What happens is that you sharpen the fifth note. You go up the fifth note 1/2 step, and that means that you end up on the minor 6. But we don't say minor 6 when we have an augmented chord. We say an augmented 5 because we need to tell them what we did with the 5, and then that's what happens. So that tells you what type. So you have one distance is the first, second, third, fourth. That's one distance, and then you have to define that distance by a major or a minor or a diminished or an augmented. And as we said, the intervals is the measurement between the distance between one note to another note, and it has nothing to do really with the scale degree, which is sometimes confused with. Scale degree is just number the notes in a scale, and the 1 is always the root note. The intervals, you can measure the intervals from anywhere to anywhere. It has nothing to do with the scale in that sense. And here you have the major scale, and the major scale in this case, I measure it from the root note, from the P1, and that is just for clarity. So you would have the major second, the major third, the perfect fourth, the perfect fifth, the major sixth, and the major seven. Before we measure that, if you remember, we measured that by tone. So you had tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 or whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step for the major scale. And we use the same reasoning for the minor scales. We measure that from the P1, and then you would have the major 2, minor third, perfect fourth, perfect fifth, minor 6, and minor 7. Or if you use the tone, that would be tone, semitone, tone, tone, semitone, tone, tone, and then you're back to octave. Or we use the whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, and you're back to the octave. Now we're going to have a formula for a major chord using intervals, and the first measurement we do is from the first note to the third note in the scale, so that would be a major third in a major chord. And to get the fifth note in the chord, we start then from major third, and we do that from P1, and we measure the distance between the third note and the fifth note, and that would be a minor third. And the formula therefore is major third and minor third. That is the formula for a major chord. You don't need to again define the P1 from where you measured. That is just taken for granted. You measure the distance 2. So you have major third and minor third. That is the formula for a major chord. And we do the same then for the minor chord. So we have the first measurement from 1 to the third notes in scale degree. That would be a minor third. And then from the third note to the fifth note, we measure again, and that distance would be a major third. And the formula for a minor chord using intervals would then be minor third, major third. And we have a quick look at the extended chord. In this case, we use the seventh chord, and the seventh chord is basically this. We're talking about the major seventh chord here. So you have a major chord, but then you add the seventh note in the scale to the chord, so you would have 4 notes in the chord. From an interval, when you measured it, it will be a major third, minor third, a major third, and in this case, it is a C major seventh chord. And you can see on the right there how that is written. And then you have the minor 7 chord. This minor 7 chords follow the same logic as the major 7 chord. You have the 1, 3, 5 notes in the minor chord, but then you add the 7th notes, so you would have a 4 chord note. In this case, it's the C minor 7 chord, and how it's written, you see that on the right. And you have the dominant 7th chord. A dominant 7 chord is a major chord, but it has a minor 7 notes in it. It's again a 4-note chord. In this case, it's the C dominant 7, and how it's written, you can see that on the right. So these 3 7th chords are extended chords that are very often used in music in all sorts of genre. So they are more or less a must know. Being comfortable with these chords means that you're gonna enhance tremendously in music. Even if you play them as chords, or you play them as arpeggios, or if you do solos or melodies, having 4 notes gives you so much more option to do great solos if you want to do that. And especially if you have a song that is played with the chord or 7th chord, then of course you need to take use of that, to use that 7th chord. That will bring music up to a level. So you have an augmented chord. An augmented chord is regarded as a major chord, but it has an augmented 5, which means that the 5th note is lifted 1/2 step to the minor 6, but we don't call that minor 6. Remember, we have to communicate what's happening. So what's happening is that the 5th note is just sharpened up 1/2 step to, and that's what we call it, a augmented 5. These chords you will probably see when you start taking out chords from a melodic minor or from a harmonic minor. I'm sure these will add up then. You see on the right there how that is written. This is a C augmented chord. Soon enough, if not yet, you will come across the diminished chord. That happens when you take out chords from a natural scale or the diatonic scale. The 7th notes, the 7th chord that you get in the major scale is a diminished chord, and a diminished chord is regarded as a minor scale because of the minor 3rd there as the 3rd note, but the 5th note is diminished to a diminished 5, and it's written how it's written. You can see on the right. So to conclude it all, interval measures the distance between 2 notes. It is sometimes confused by the scale degree. Scale degree only numbers the notes in a scale. The intervals measure the distance between 2 notes. So that measurement doesn't necessarily have to be from the P1, from the root note. It can be anywhere. That distance goes also beyond the 8th note, the octave. It goes away. It can be the 15th note, or it can be the 9th. It can happen. You just have to be comfortable with that, learn that. Having those 2 distances, we saw the minor and major scale. For clarity though, we measured that from the root notes, and it is because it gives us such a clear picture of the major and the minor scale. The major scale uses the types of distance in major, so you would have a major 2nd, major 3rd, perfect 4, perfect 5th, major 6, major 7, and the minor scale would have the only major 2, because that's the same for both scales, but then it would have a minor 3, a perfect 4, perfect 5, a minor 6, and a minor 7. And then we do the triads. The triads are really the chord notes, and often we talk about the thirds stacked on top of each other, and this is the reason why we say that. If you look at the major chord, you would have a major 3rd, and then stacked on top of that you would have a minor 3rd. And if you looked on the minor chord, you would have a minor 3rd, and stacked on top of that would be the major 3rd. And the extended chord was again new 3rds just stacked on top of those 3rds. So For a major 7th chord, you would use the 7th note. That would be another major 3 stacked on top. For the minor 7 chord, you would just use the 7th chord in a minor scale, so that would be a minor 3rd stacked on top of the other thirds. And for a dominant 7 chord, that's a major scale, but you would use a minor 7th chord, 7th note for that chord, and that's a minor 3rd. So again, you just stack a 3rd on top of the other thirds. Then you had the augmented chords, and again, those are also triads. And they are also thirds stacked on top of each other. So the augmented chord is regarded as a major scale because it has a major 3rd as its 3rd note, but then it has an augmented 5th, and that goes into the minor 6 distance, if you wish. But for clarity, when communicating, we're talking about an augmented chord here, and the augmented chord means that the 5th has been augmented, and that's why you say an augmented 5th. And the measurement for that would be major 3rd, major 3rd. And the diminished chord you will soon see in the chord scale. The chord scale, the 7th note in the major scale is a diminished note, diminished chord. And then it's diminished because the 5th has been flattened 1/2 step. So the 5th is diminished 1/2 step. It is a minor chord, regarded as a minor chord, because the 3rd note there is a minor 3rd. I think this concludes the very basics of intervals and how to use the intervals. I wish you very good luck going forward playing. Don't forget to play, that's the most important thing. I will also publish a video on chord progression. And in chord progression, we start with taking out chords from a scale, a diatonic scale, and then we make music out of that, basically. So it's going to be 2 videos, where one is that they do the chord scales, and we go into something called the circle of thirds, which are really good to know, and how to look at chords and the notes, and how to combine them with other instruments, and how to create solos and so forth. And in the second video, we will actually compose an original, and I will do that with you. And then we do some comparison with that in the 4th chord song, that is called. So we're going to use the 4th chord song, and then we're going to change the chord progression a little bit just to hear the difference, and that's going to be so much fun. But until that, have a really good day, play along as much as you can.